And then once they amassed subscribers, they were going to start introducing propaganda to try and spur militia groups, or what they were calling at the time, smart mobs. And what we're seeing here from Bad Bunny, from Mike from PA, are these LARPing lefty dipshits that, because Cuba is communism, they don't want to criticize it. So you've probably seen by now that there's a lot going on in Cuba. Particularly, there are massive protests that are erupting everywhere. Cuba protests, thousands rally against government as economy struggles. There is no food, no medicine, there is no freedom, they do not let us live, one of Sunday's protesters told BBC. The protests are significant because government critics face harsh punishment for dissident in Cuba. Now, the president of Cuba, who's much more like a dictator, even authorized protesters to be fired upon. He authorized the military to fire upon them. The president addressed the nation in a TV broadcast and blamed the U.S. for the turmoil. He called its tight sanctions on Cuba, which have been in place in various forms since 1962, a policy of economic suffocation. Now, he's partially correct right there. It is true that the U.S. has really strict sanctions on Cuba, and that is definitely playing a role in the unrest in that region. That's absolutely true. But this is being framed in a lot of different ways. The first way that it's being framed is a big rally, a big protest against communism. They're fighting the goddamn commies. Yeah! Spank the tank, damn it! Kind of. Some of the protesters are criticizing communism, but it seems that the overall majority of these protests are around economic crisis that have been hit hard by U.S. sanctions and more recently COVID. They get a lot of tourism that fuels the economy. It goes without being said that COVID obviously played a role in cutting back people taking a nice vacay over to Cuba. Cubans have been angered by the collapse of the economy, food and medicine shortages, price hikes, and the government's handling of the pandemic. They're screaming down with the dictatorship. A lot of this is not necessarily intrinsic with communism, or more specifically socialism. Now, some could argue that I'm a socialist because I want stronger social safety nets, but most of us are familiar with the fact that there are different levels of both communism and socialism. We hear a lot of people talk about market socialism now, which is a hell of a lot different than a communist dictatorship. Obviously, there are some differences there. So this isn't really impugning all of communism. These issues aren't really intrinsic to communism even. This is much more of a protest against issues in Cuba that have arisen due to the pandemic. So that's the first way that this is being framed, especially by people on the right, that, oh, it's an anti-communist thing. Yeah, stick it to the commies. But it's not just being framed kind of crazily and unrealistically by people on the right. It's also being framed really weirdly by some people on the left. Specifically, we have Bad Bunny, which I have a screenshot here. She did a stream on Cuba yesterday, and the title was, "So the CIA is astroturfing in Cuba again." Basically blaming the CIA for the protests. It wasn't just Bad Bunny that said this. It was also our buddy, Mike from PA. Searching Cuba results in Twitter recommending that you follow the CIA. Nothing suspicious going on here. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that a ton of people are saying bullshit like this, so the algorithm just pairs the CIA with when you search Cuba. No, certainly the CIA is trying to co-opt the Twitter searches. Ooh, spooky. Why is Mike from PA alluding to this like bizarre conspiracism? Why is Bad Bunny making claims that the CIA is doing this in Cuba? Well, it's because the US does have a pretty long history of fucking with Cuba. The Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961 was a failed attack launched by the CIA during the Kennedy administration to push Cuban leader Fidel Castro from power. So it is true that the US has, on multiple different occasions, tried to fuck with Cuba. The first being here, the Bay of Pigs, trying to push out the communist leader. The way that they were planning on doing this was by first taking out their airplanes so they would have no line of escape, and then they were having small militias that were going to rise up and start fighting. However, this became a massive, massive disaster. The first part of the plan was to destroy Castro's tiny air force, making it impossible for his military to resist the invaders. However, it turned out that Castro and his advisors knew about the raid and had moved the planes already. So that was the first issue, but it was too late because on April 17th, the Cuban Exiles Brigade began its invasion at an isolated spot. Hundreds were killed and over 1,000 people were taken prisoner. This was a massive fail. But this is an important detail here because the way that the US went about doing this was almost by using war tactics, right? The US fucked around with Cuba in more subtle ways also on two different occasions. First, from 2009 to 2011 or 2012, the US created an app where people who participated with that app were unaware that the US was involved in this. And this app was basically to provide access to Cuban people, to Cubans? Cuban people? Yeah, to Cubans, and provide them access to the internet. So another issue in Cuba is that internet is heavily restricted and regulated by the government. It really is very authoritarian over there. But the app had a different intention, which was to amass subscribers by posting content that was like, hey, sports, hey, here's some weather updates. And then once they amassed subscribers, they were going to start introducing propaganda to try and spur militia groups, or what they were calling at the time, smart mobs. And then there was a second attempt at an app very similar that only amassed like 12,000 users compared to the first one that had over 40,000. The second one was shut down in 2018. Make no mistake, the US has fucked with Cuba in the past. Yes, 100%. What gets crazy, though, is to claim that these current protests are caused by the CIA. What that is delegitimizing the very valid reason that these people have for protesting their government. And what we're seeing here from Bad Bunny, from Mike from PA, are these LARPing lefty dipshits that because Cuba is communism, they don't want to criticize it. Oh, it's a communist country. If there's a protest against any country that's communism, well, it must just be the CIA. I'm not like a conspiracy theorist boomer, though, I promise. There are multiple ways you could look at this also. The first being, how has America historically tried to fuck with Cuba? It was by trying to spur on militia groups, taking out their airfields, and then indoctrinating people via propaganda, all with pro-America, pro-democracy, anti-communism shit. Okay, their goal with Cuba was always to take out communism. But what we're seeing here is not really a massive protest against communism. There are some that are complaining about communism, but these issues, like we already said, are not really intrinsic to communism. They're just different ways that like these protests have unfolded as opposed to what we've seen in the past when America is trying to do these covert operations. There's a difference between speculation and making a claim, okay? But when you make a claim based on speculation, like Bad Bunny titling her shit, "The CIA is messing with Cuba," then it becomes a conspiracy theory. Because you are now making claims based on no evidence. We have no evidence that the CIA is behind this. In fact, we have more evidence kind of to the contrary. So honestly, shame on these dumb fuck LARPers who can sit on their Twitch streams all day and never have to face the hardships of anything in life to try and delegitimize protesters who it sounds like have very valid reasons for protesting their government when they can be thrown in prison for so much as protesting, when their own president has authorized protesters to be fired upon. Shame on you for trying to delegitimize that because you're too much of a fucking LARPer that you don't want to criticize precious communism. So yeah, that's kind of my thought on Cuba. Hope you guys enjoyed it. This video was made possible by the generous support from my patrons. If you want to help support the channel, get cool benefits, and have your name featured on my channel, then become a patron by clicking the link down below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the bell so you get notified when I drop a new video.